So we'll get started in just a second. Okay, great. So this is our third Lunch and Learn session on the Community Economic Resilience Fund. As many of you know, the applications for the program are due on July 25th. So our team is deep in the process of completing the grant application materials and other information. So for all of you on the phone who have been helpful in that process, I want to let you know how deeply grateful Sierra Business Council is for your partnership and your assistance. It has been really quite rewarding to see the region come together around this effort, and I think that presages what the next 2 years might look like in thinking through how these funds could be deployed in the region. So thank you all, and I really appreciate all of the efforts that you've put in. We have an agenda today that is largely focused on updating on where we are in the application process. So what we plan to cover today is a brief recap of the CERF process. And while we are doing that, our team members will be sharing in the chat links the recordings of the previous sessions. For those of you that have not been able to participate to date, you can go back and see what was done in the first 2 sessions after this meeting. We'll also be sharing the vision and goals of the program, so you can open those while we're walking through where we are on the application process to date. And we'll also be sharing the collective partnership agreement letter that we have been asking many of you to sign to kind of demonstrate regional support for the effort. So the agenda will be a brief recap of the CERF process, and then we wanted to update on the status of the partnership agreement letters, update on the governance model and some of the issues that we've identified from talking to stakeholders throughout the region of things we need to be thinking about in that governance model, and then give you kind of a brief foreshadow of the budgeting breakdown that we're envisioning at this point. So that's the agenda to date. But you know, it occurs to me that we see a few new faces on the phone call. So I'm maybe thinking that we might want to run through and have everyone do a really quick, brief introduction. And in the interest of time, I'll just note that we have at least 5 SBC team members on the call, and maybe we won't introduce ourselves at this point in order to keep this brief. But I'm here, I'm the president of Sierra Business Council. Kristen York, who is the vice president of Sierra Business Council, is here as well. Kaylee Reynolds, who works on our economic empowerment and climate and energy programs. Erica Bacchus, who is our government affairs assistant, and Erica Harvey, and Justine Quealy. So a lot of SBC staff here today. You can tell that we're deep in this application process. And then as a special treat, my board chair, Alan Pietrasanta, is on the line as well. But I'm wondering if we could just quickly go through and have everyone else introduce themselves, and I'll read through the list in the interest of time, starting with David Griffith.
Alpine County Supervisor.
Great, thanks, David. And Lindsay?
It's actually Gavin Delmas. I'm using Lindsay's Zoom platform right now, but Eastside Iron Company based here in Bishop, California.
Oh yeah, I ran into some of your staff members when I was in Bishop a couple weeks ago. That's great that you're here.
Oh,
and Lee?
Oh, and probably less, right?
Oh, Les, sorry
that-
about that.
no, that's
See, my
okay.
old eyes are failing me, you know?
That's not a problem. Les Fong with San Joaquin Small Business Development Center, and we represent also Alpine, Amador, and Calaveras counties.
Oh, great, Les. I'm so glad that you're on.
Oh,
Anne,
Ann Segerstrom, Sonora City Council and member of the Central Sierra Economic Development District.
great, thanks, Anne. And Maureen,
Sorry about that. Yeah, Maureen Frank, County Administrator's Office for Tuolumne County.
great. David,
Hi, good day. David Goldenberg, Tuolumne County Supervisor for District 1.
great, thanks for being here, David. And Robin,
I'm Robin Bolzer. I own the Great Basin Bakery. I'm also a board member of INU 350, which is a climate activist group here in Bishop.
and the baker of the best cinnamon rolls in the Sierra Nevada. Just
Thanks.
every time I'm on the east side, I stop there. So,
Thank you.
Rosemary,
Rosemary Smallcomb, Mariposa County District 1 Supervisor.
great, thanks, Rosemary. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Steve.
And Emily,
Good afternoon. My name is Emily Graham. I'm the planning manager for Metalload Job Training, serving Calaveras, Amador, Mariposa, and Tuolumne counties, and also part-time staff to the Central Sierra Economic Development District.
oh, great. So great to have you guys on. Key community partner. Kathleen,
Hi, everybody. Kathleen Haff, Supervisor for Tuolumne County.
really excited to have all this participation from Tuolumne. And by the way, we are planning on doing our Sierra Business Council Board of Directors meeting there in November. So it will be our pleasure to have you all in for a cocktail at some point during that process, or a non-cocktail. Terrence,
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Terrence Rogers with RCRC. I'm on the Economic Development team.
great, thanks, Terrence. Kathy,
Hi, everybody. Kathy Galino, Calaveras County Economic and Community Development, and also citizen member on the Central Sierra Economic Development District.
great. Griselda,
Hi everyone, my name is Griselda Ortiz and I'm a prevention specialist for Inyo County First 5.
oh, wonderful. So great to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Rebecca,
Rebecca Callan, City Administrator for the City of Angels Camp. We're the one incorporated city in Calaveras County.
great to have you here too. And let's see, have I missed anybody? Kenji?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Kenji Shimabukuro from San Joaquin SBDC, Program Manager, and we cover Alpine, Amador, and Calaveras County.
Great. Dean?
Dean Tonina, Mono Lake Kutsataka tribe here in Mono County. And I did watch the second meeting that you had recorded. So I've got a little bit of background on that. Thank you.
Great, Dean. Super happy to have you here. Kelly? Maybe we'll come back to Kelly and go to Karen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen Warburton. I'm with Amador County, and I am a senior admin analyst here.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Nice to sit in on your board meeting yesterday as well.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you.
Tina.
Hi, I'm Tina Mather. I'm the director of the Resource Connection Food Bank serving Calaveras County.
Oh, cool. That's really good. Really important. And let's go back to, who did I miss? Rebecca, I think.
Nope, you got me.
Oh, okay. So have I missed anybody? Oh, I see Ben Stopper.
Yeah, hi there. This is Susan Weatherby. I'm a director with the Calaveras Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for coming.
Ben Stopper with Calaveras County Supervisor, District 5.
Great, Ben. Thanks for chiming in. Okay, have I missed anybody that in my attempt to go over the?
And this is Kim Anaclario with Mammoth Lakes Recreation, a nonprofit in Mono County.
Oh, good. Thank you for being here. Anyone else?
And this is Sasha Christofferson, Director for the Resource Connection WIC program, serving Amador and Calaveras counties.
Oh, cool. So we have a lot of new people on the call today. So number one, I would encourage you guys to go back and watch the recordings of the previous sessions. They won't really be necessary to track with what we're doing today. And we will, in the interest of having so many new people, do a brief recap of what the CERF program itself is. So on the next slide, Sierra Business Council is taking the lead on developing the application for the Community Economic Resilience Fund. We are intending to apply as both the fiscal agent for the CERF process and the regional convener. And we'll talk in a couple minutes about what those roles would entail. Next slide, please. So the CERF is a one-time state general fund allocation that will distribute $600 million to 13 regions across California to support inclusive and low carbon economic development. The grant guidelines are available on the Labor and Workforce Development Agency website, and there's a link to those grant guidelines at the end of this presentation, which will be shared with you. The program has been put together by the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So it's kind of a collaborative effort within state government in order to address kind of economic restructuring and revitalization issues in the wake of the COVID crisis. So this is an opportunity for us to look long-term at economic development in our regions with a focus on disinvested communities, disadvantaged individuals within the region, and the creation of what are known as high road jobs, or jobs that pay above the area median income. So the focus of the program is really heavily on this issue of conducting a planning process in order to invest implementation dollars in job creation that will really move the needle on poverty and other issues within our region. As I said, there are 13 regions across the state. You'll see a map in just a second. The $600 million is being deployed in 2 tranches of funding. The first are phase 1 planning grants. That is the application that we're in the process of doing right now. And each of those 13 regions is eligible to receive up to $5 million for the convening of a high road transition collaborative that develops a regional economic development plan that addresses those issues. Phase 2 of the program are regional implementation grants. There's $500 million set aside from that. The program guidelines for the deployment of those funds have not been completed yet. We're expecting them to come out in October. So they will be concurrent with a portion of our planning phase. So that's something really important to note, that what we're lining up for is how we can access that $500 million in implementation funding, which is roughly intended to go out equitably across those 13 regions of the state. Something I think that is really important to note is that part of the planning process is looking for opportunities for leverage with other pots of state and federal funding. So the grants that go into each of these 13 regions should be able to leverage additional investments from both state and federal programs, and hopefully the private sector, at some exponential increment above that $40 million level. We are hoping that we can identify projects that will achieve significant leverage in the region. So the planning process that we're in the middle of right now is for the phase 1 planning grants. The planning phase solicitation is due on July 25th at, I think, 10 o'clock in the morning, which is a weird time. So, maybe it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, still kind of a weird time. So we are hoping to have our planning grant completed by the Friday before that. You know, as you might guess, we have a lot of work to do to get to that, but we're doing really well, and we don't think there are going to be any problems getting to a completed application. We expect the Labor and Workforce Development Agency and EDD to announce the recipients in September, and then work through September and early October to put contracts in place for implementing the program, with the planning phase project start date in October, and then implementation phase 2 guidelines released sometime in November. So a brief recap of those regions across the state of California. We are in the Eastern Sierra region, which all of my friends on the Eastern Sierra are excited about the expansion of their geographic identity to the West Slope. It's a 7-county region, including Alpine, Mono, Inyo, Mariposa, Tuolumne, Calaveras, and Amador. 20,000 square miles, 186,000 people in that region. And we've already done some preliminary work identifying kind of the current economic development drivers where most of the economic activity is taking place, which you see on the screen, and potential high growth sectors based on kind of state policy, economic and demographic information, and other things. We, of course, expect that to change as we do additional analysis as part of the phase 1 planning grant. So
That's it.
Okay.
One of the key, so you know what, before we go on, maybe since we do have some new people on the call, why don't we pause here for just a second and see if there are any questions about the CERF program itself before we move on. Okay, if not, then let's get into the things that that we need to do in order to get to our July 25th submission date. So one of the requirements of the solicitation is that we submit partnership agreement letters, and these partnership agreement letters really kind of identify the participants and their agreement to participate in the process. Many of you have already received all of those materials. If not, they're shared in the chat right now. Probably the best document to look at to see what that level of commitment is the vision and goals document that has been shared in the chat. There are a variety of different levels of participation. But what's really important at this point is that we get as many of those partnership agreement letters in as we possibly can before the deadline for project submission. So we've kind of set a goal of having all of those done. Originally, our goal was July 15th, but we know we have many of them that have been agreed to but are outstanding in delivery to us. So we're extending that goal to July 18th. All of you should have received already kind of the information packets that go along with the partnership agreement letters to think through what the level of commitment is. I want to be really clear that signing the partnership agreement letter does not commit you to a specific level of participation in the process. It's really up to you to decide how involved you want to be. There are a variety of different opportunities. One would be serving on the council that oversees the overall process, which has a relatively robust commitment level. The second would be being a committee member The committees would be reporting to the council and addressing kind of some of the specific issues. And you'll see that laid out in the governance model in just a minute. Or you could just participate by attending the committee or the council meetings and weighing in as a member of, of the collaborative with public comment and documents or other things. So there are a variety of different levels of participation, kind of scaled to what your individual capacities are for participation. I also want to note that we have some funding set aside for community-based organizations for participation in order to pay stipends for their time and travel and other things. And we'll get into that in just a minute. So the participation letter kind of format is laid out here, and templates for the participation letters are in the chat right now. So we have received a number of these to date. So to all of you on the call who have submitted your participation letters, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is a more robust list than we thought we were going to get to at this point. So all of these on the screen have already submitted signed participation letters. And then we also have a number of entities who have made the decisions and committed to sign participation letters, including the Central Sierra Economic Development District, the Mother Lode Job Training Center, Calaveras County, Mariposa County, the North Valley Labor Federation, the Central Sierra Environmental Research Council, Inyo County, and Mono County. So they have already made the decision, but have not submitted their letters yet. And we're waiting for those to come in. And of course, anyone on the call who would like to sign a participation letter, we would really welcome your participation. So that's kind of the status so far. We do have a couple of holes, in my humble opinion. And maybe we could go to the next slide. We're a little bit weak on individual major employers. So if there are large employers in your regions, I'm thinking in particular, healthcare, like the hospital districts would be really good, or the hospitals would be really good to get on, since healthcare is a major employer. I would like to have a couple more labor organizations. So we do have the North Valley Labor Federation committed, but I was thinking in particular SEIU 1021 and Laborers Local 1130 would be really good, since they're really important kind of participants in the region. We're a little light on community-based organizations. So if there are additional CBOs that we could reach out to, or that you could help us reach out to, that would be really great. Environmental justice organizations, we have a couple of environmental organizations, but no one with a specific focus on environmental justice. So if there are organizations that we could be reaching out to and recruiting, we would really like to. General community, like members who would qualify under that disinvested community definition. It would be good to have kind of more of those voices at the table. And then California Native American tribes, we've been reaching out, but would really love to have a tribal partner to help with tribal outreach. And if you're interested in that role, it's really important to note that number one, we have funding set aside for tribal participation. And number two, there is a separate pot of funding within the Community Economic Resilience Fund to pay for capacity building with tribal entities to be able to participate in these processes. So we could talk about that offline. So maybe I'll pause there for just a minute to see if there are any questions or comments regarding the participation letters.
Stephen?
Well, okay, everyone, Griselda, go ahead, please.
Yes, I do have a question. Where can I send it?
So we will send you the package separately. You registered for the call, so we have your email address, I take it. If not, please drop it in the chat. But those
Okay.
are coming to Sierra Business Council, and then we are appending them to the application. So
Okay, I'll put my email right now in the chat.
great. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the participation letters?
Yes, David Griffith here. I did send you a list of local organizations and contacts, and I'm a bit disappointed if you didn't get any responses, which it sounds like you didn't.
Well, that we may have gotten responses, David, but not letters yet, right? So we have been reaching out to everyone on those lists, but we haven't received signed participation agreement letters yet, which is really what we need to include in the application. So maybe we could circle back around with you individually to see if there are specific CBOs or entities that maybe you could help us reach out to. That would be great.
Yeah, on the tribal issues, it takes a long time to work with the tribes. I think you probably know that. And so even if they're eventually going to be on board, they're probably not going to meet your deadline.
Yeah, and when we get to the governance model, we'll talk about that a little bit, because it is really important that we get tribal participation, but there's also time for us to adjust that governance model in order to include like additional participants later on in the process. So we recognize that that might be a bit of a challenge on a short deadline, which we are now on a pretty short deadline. So. Okay, other questions or comments on the participation letter before we move on?
Steve, it's Rosemary. My question is, with respect to community-based organizations, can you elaborate a little bit about, one, what kinds of organizations you have in mind, and then secondly, what the ask would be were those organizations to agree to participate?
So the ask is laid out in that vision and goals document that is in the chat, okay? And there are, as I said, various levels of participation. And we are fortunate that we have, for example, the Tuolumne County Arts Council on board, the White Bark Institute on board, so CERF on board. Some of them have been responding, and I think will over the next week, right? But in particular, I think chambers of commerce would be fantastic. And I'm really happy to have a chamber on the line today. Arts organizations, social service, community-based organizations. So for example, the food banks, the groups that work directly with providing services in the communities, right? And any organizations working on essentially kind of workforce education and training or workforce development or those types of efforts would be really helpful. But important to note, like the economy is about everyone, right? So everyone is invited and we hope to have participate. But in the time we have left, I think we should be focusing on these disinvested communities, social service organizations, the entities that we've had low response from so far.
Okay. Can I just follow up real quickly? One of our main nonprofit organizations that works in what I'd call the social services arena is Alliance for Community Transformations. And under that umbrella, they have CASA. They have our Mountain Crisis, which is a domestic violence survivor assistance organization. And then they have Ethos, which provides services and support for young folks, high school age kids, and Pathos, which does screen printing and gets those kids ready to actually develop skills so that they can get jobs. So is that the kind of social services that you have in mind?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Rosemary, why don't we, maybe you could drop me an email with a contact?
Actually, I'm going to be meeting with their ED in a couple hours. So I'll talk with her. And I'll look at the vision document. If I have any questions, I'll call Justine, I guess, quickly before I go over at 2:30.
Yeah, either Justine or, well, you have Justine's number. You could call Justine. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Like, this is what I want you guys to help with. If you have people you can recruit, now is crunch time. Right? So,
Okay, thanks.
okay, let's go on to the next section. So I wanted to just give people a reminder of what the proposed governance structure is at this point, and then give you a little foreshadowing of some of the issues that we've identified that we think are going to need to be addressed during the planning process. So the governance structure that we're going to be submitting with the application calls for the creation of this High Road Transition Collaborative Council, which, by the way, post-application, we might rebrand to be a little less wonky, okay? And we're envisioning that council having 21 members plus a non-voting chair, so a total of 22 members, with roughly 3 members from each county, and those members representing the diversity of the stakeholders that are required to participate in the process. So if we have more applicants for that council than we have people who are submitting applications to serve, we would go through some kind of a process to select who is on that council based on that stakeholder, the required stakeholder matrix that we have to deal with, right? So it is possible in the future that that council might get expanded if we see significantly more community participation or desire for those positions. But this is what we're submitting with the application. And then we're envisioning 5 committees that are actually working through the elements of that regional plan. 1 addressing equity, climate, and labor issues. 1 working on business and workforce development issues. 1 local government committee, making sure that we have alignment with kind of local government economic development priorities and planning processes. And that includes, by the way, the Central Sierra Economic Development District economic planning process and the ESCOG, the Eastern Sierra Council of Governments economic development planning processes. 1 subcommittee working on reviewing data and planning and drafting the document itself. So this committee would be charged largely with reviewing the document elements and then matriculating them to the council. And then 1 subcommittee working specifically on identifying and vetting potential projects for implementation funding that would be included in the plan. So there's a council level, and then there's a committee level, and then the committees would have 7 voting members and then open membership to the general public. So the idea here is that for everyone that wants to participate, there's a place where they can participate in this process. The decision-making process would be consensus-based unless there is an objection to a specific decision, in which case that objection will have the ability to call the question, debate the issue, and call for a vote. And operational issues, that is public outreach, process, those things, would have a 50% vote threshold, but the projects, matriculating projects into the plan would have a 2/3 vote threshold. And the rationale behind this is that we would like to advance projects as batches of 3 or 4 projects at a time. And we think there should be a slightly higher threshold for that, so that we make sure that there's no ability to kind of block projects based on on an individual objection, that they have to be kind of more deeply vetted than any other piece of it. So some of the issues that we've identified in that governance structure that we know we're going to have to be working on throughout the process are, number 1, building capacity across the region for participation. And when we get to the budget, we can talk about that again, because we have put aside a significant amount of funding in the budget for assistance with capacity. And then establishing kind of a consistent and convenient meeting schedule. We know that if these meetings are too long or too onerous, it's going to be difficult for people to participate. So, so this is something else we're working on right now. Fortunately, we do have a good location, I think, where we can do hybrid meetings, which is the Motherlode Job Training Center in Sonora that has one of the best kind of audio visual setups I've ever seen in the Sierra, by the way. I love that room, Emily.
Thank you. I had nothing to do with it, but thank you.
It's going to make this process so much easier, I have to tell you, right? And then allowing for alternative voting members if it's necessary for people who can't participate. So we've identified the point that we're going to need to like look at some of these capacities issues, and then also engaging disinvested communities. So there's a lot of kind of, we think that all of these materials and all of the meetings are going to need to be simultaneously translated and made available in at least 2 languages. So we are working that into the process. And then also looking at how projects that specifically benefit disinvested communities will be scored within that project development process. So, and then we're also really thinking about what language we need to use in order to engage the general public and not make this process too wonky and difficult, kind of difficult to assess or to access for general community members. We really want a lot of public participation. So we'll be looking at that effort. And then we're also looking at the point that there might be a need to grow that high road transition collaborative in phase 1 and moving into phase 2 for implementation, allowing for people to join in membership throughout that 2-year process, regularly reevaluating the council to make sure that we have fair and adequate representation across all of the groups that have been identified, and then looking at the composition of the HRTC as we transition from phase 1 to phase 2 as needed. So phase 1 develops the plan, phase 2 kind of implements or moves forward the implementation of projects. So we think there's going to need to be a reevaluation at that point on the governance model. So although you guys are signing on to a governance model, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of the point that there's time and there's a place for adjusting that model to meet community needs. So any questions on that before we move on? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next section. I'm going to close my window because there's tons of Firewise community work going on in my backyard. So I want to talk next about kind of the data collection strategy and then the budget. So the phase 1 project application requires us to identify a data collection strategy. And what you see listed on the screen are the required elements of that data collection strategy. So we know that some of your organizations and agencies have already been doing some of this data collection. So for example, I know that there is a CEDS or a comprehensive economic development strategy process going on at the Central Sierra Economic Development District. Many of the counties and cities have economic development strategies. So in this process, we would be looking at all of those and looking at where the opportunity for alignment with those existing strategies and priorities exists, right? But simultaneous with that process, we would also be working with a contractor to do a regional economic summary, a regional labor analysis. I know Motherlode Job Training Center already has a lot of that information for the Central Sierra region. So we will be relying heavily on your data around that regional labor analysis. An economic cluster analysis, an inventory of workforce education and training assets within the region, and a gaps analysis of what's missing in workforce education and training, an identification process around disinvested communities. And disinvested communities are defined in 3 or 4 different ways by the state, including the Cal Enviro Screen tool, the California Public Resources Code tool, a California Department of Public Health tool, and then GoBiz's own analysis of what qualifies as disinvested. So there will be a requirement in this process that we're looking at the impact of the projects on disinvested communities under about 4 or 5 different code definitions of disinvestment. So we're gonna have to do an analysis of where all those communities are and who the affected populations are. We're also going to need to look at regional climate analysis, looking at both climate vulnerability and then the status of climate planning within the region to align projects with state climate objectives. That's the low carbon economy piece of this. That doesn't mean that all of the projects need to be focused on that, but it means that we need to be taking that into consideration as part of the process. So we've already been looking at how we could do that for the entire Eastern Sierra region. And then also a public health analysis. So, so it is our plan in this process to contract with California State University at Chico, their Center for Economic Development, for the economic data for the entire region. They already are under contract with the Central Sierra Economic Development District to run the data for the CEDS in the Central Sierra. So this would expand that data run to cover all of the eastern side of our Eastern Sierra region as well. And then also align with whatever process the Eastern Sierra Council of Governments is going to go through to do a CEDS on the east side. So we thought it would make a lot of sense to have the same contractor doing that on both sides of the Sierra, especially since they're already running the data for Central Sierra Economic Development District. And then it's our plan for Sierra Business Council and our climate team to run the climate data and analysis. So that's kind of an overview of the data collection strategy that we're going to include in the grant application. And if we can move on to the budget, we do have a rough budget breakdown at this point. So I have a couple caveats on this. Number one, we're not done with the budget yet, and we know it's probably going to get adjusted a little bit back and forth between these 3 big pots, okay? So until we've completed the budget, I just want to make it clear to everyone that this is, you know, this is temporary at this point until the final application is in. But, you know, we have up to $5 million that we can apply for. We plan on kind of maxing that and applying for the full $5 million, broken into 3 rough categories. So the first category is management of the project itself, including all of the community outreach, the project management, the contracting, the fiscal management of the funds themselves, hosting and convening the meetings, the technology, one-on-one meetings with stakeholders throughout the process. So there's a pretty robust public process here that needs to be managed for a 2-year period. So of that $5 million, roughly $1.3 million is in project management, community engagement, and all of those pieces. The second large tranche of funding is community partnership and capacity building. So we've set aside roughly $2.7 million in the budget for community partnership and capacity building. And it is our intent to directly identify some of the core partners that we've identified so far in the application. But I want to make clear that there is an opportunity for additional partnerships as we move forward, right? So we've identified kind of direct partnerships with the Eastern Sierra Council of Governments, the Central Sierra Economic Development District, the Mother Lode Job Training Center, and the Bishop Business Resource Center. So of that $2.7 million, about $1 million of that funding is set aside for capacity building and expansion of economic development capacities and providing services through those 4 entities, which are kind of core community infrastructure for economic development. And then $1.7 million is set aside for community engagement with all other organizations and entities, largely community-based organizations. I do want to point out that there's a real opportunity for a tribal entity to take the lead on tribal engagement here. Of that $1.7 million, if there was a tribal entity that wanted to kind of lead on tribal engagement in this process, there would be funding in there to pay for staff at a tribal entity to play that role and coordinate with us. So about $2.7 million goes into community capacity and partnership. And then the final tranche in the budget is the data and the analysis. So as I mentioned, we would contract with Cal State Chico to lead on the economic analysis. Sierra Business Council would lead on the climate analysis. And we're in conversations through Cal State Chico with Cal Poly at Humboldt to lead on the public health analysis. We don't have final numbers on these budget areas yet, but we don't think that the data and analysis is going to exceed $1 million in this process. So we've set aside $1 million in the budget for those 3 core tasks, with the lion's share of it actually being done by Cal State Chico. So that's kind of a rough breakdown of where we are on the budget to date. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. That's kind of all I have. Why don't we just open it to general comments or questions from everyone that's on the line today. So once again, partnership letters, man, that's the big deal. We really need the partnership letters in by early next week, by the 18th. We need a tribal partner. I would love to get Columbia College on board. If someone could help us with that, I would really appreciate it. And I would love to have kind of a Latino community organization on board as part of this process as well. I think this is part of the focus in the region on kind of lifting up, voices that are not often heard in the economic development field within our community. So if we could identify contacts there with you guys, we would really appreciate it.
Hey, Steve, it's Kathy Galino.
Hey, Kathy.
So I've got a healthcare district that I'll get a letter from. I've got our Visitors Bureau that I'm going to get a letter from, and also our Community Action Agency for Calaveras.
Oh, great. That's fantastic.
I'm making up for being late on my letter.
You're not that late. Everyone's a little late.
And I think Mother Lode, between myself and Dave, we can reach out to Lena Tran at Columbia College.
Yeah, that would be really important. I don't know if you noticed, Saracosa College is already on board. So if that helps, you can let them know that there's a little bit of like healthy competition between the community colleges. Rosemary, I just sent an email to Tara. We don't have a letter from Mariposa County yet.
Okay, well, I'm the chair this year, so I'll see what I can do about making sure that you get the letter from the county. Couple other thoughts, and the timing probably won't work out for the 18th, but the county has been developing, in the process of developing relationships with UC Merced. Are you looking, as you probably know, they have their, what is it? It's their
Sierra Nevada Research Institute.
Say what? Oh, no, I was thinking they have a venture development. That's not the right name, but it's sort of an incubator for new businesses. And I wondered if it is appropriate to consider inviting UC Merced.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, even though they're not in Mariposa County. UC
Yeah,
Merced.
but they really serve that region. And like their specific focus when they were created was to improve services in the Sierra Nevada region, which is why they created the Sierra Nevada Research Institute. So I think that would be a really good addition.
Okay.
And the
all
more
right.
business entrepreneurship we could get, the better.
Right. Okay. I'll reach out to them.
Thank you so much.
You
Dean,
bet.
I see you had your hand up.
Yes, this is Dean Tonina with the Mono Lake Kutsataka tribe in Mono County, and I just wanted to share just a few insights regarding tribal participation. I think as many know that, tribes really haven't been included in years past on efforts such as this. And, so California as a state has really come in and made an emphasis on including California tribes among other disadvantaged groups. And I think one of the things that from a tribal perspective is tribes just really aren't sure of how their participation is going to really play out. Are organizations wanting tribal involvement so they get that tribal box checked? Or is it more substantive? And I think that's probably going to be an issue with the tribes, just not knowing what their level of involvement will really play out to be come implementation time. And Steve, you had mentioned there's these different pots of money. And so would the tribal folks be looking at this other set of funding, or would they be looking more at this general funding? Because I think that would be a question that tribes would have just right off the bat. So just curious.
So to answer that question first, so tribal entities wanting to participate in this process in the Eastern Sierra could draw funds from this budget for their participation. So it doesn't need to be tied to the separate pot of funding that the CERF process has for tribal participation. So we have set aside money in our budget to encourage kind of capacity at tribal organizations for participation. Now, in addition to that, the overall Community Economic Resilience Fund has a $20 million set aside for tribal engagement. They have not released the guidelines on that yet. They're anticipating those guidelines will come out in October. I think the intent of having that as a separate process is so that there's direct tribal engagement in project implementation, so that if tribes need assistance in implementing projects that have been developed through tribal processes, like, for example, tribal economic development agencies or efforts, right, that they would have a pot of funding to go to for additional assistance. But Dean, any tribal entity that wanted to participate in this process, we could provide capacity support for. I think the second or the first issue you raised, which is a really interesting one, is what is the crosswalk between the tribal economic empowerment agenda and this CERF economic agenda? And indeed, it's true. I think that many communities in California have been left behind in these efforts in the past. It would be our intent to have specific projects identified that would benefit tribal communities for project implementation. I think that is really the intent of this program, is to begin to rectify some of those historic kind of inequities in how state funding is distributed for these purposes. And that would certainly be, as the project manager, that would certainly be kind of our desire as well, would be to identify specific tribal projects that would be advanced for implementation.
Yes, thank you for that. And So it seems like you've been referencing implementation dollars. Is there a parallel with planning?
So the tribal engagement in planning is in the individual CERF planning grants. The guidelines for tribal engagement in implementation have not been released yet. So we don't really know whether that would cross over between planning and implementation or not. But we could check with GoBiz to see where they are. And Terrence, I know you're on the line. Maybe you have more information on that than we do, but we have not seen draft guidelines for tribal engagement yet.
No, not to my knowledge, Steve. I'll check with Bob and Barbara, but I think I'm right where you are.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that input. I don't know, maybe a possible follow-up once maybe we've got more information would be useful in moving forward.
Well, Dean, maybe we could set up a time to talk on Friday.
Yeah, I'll look at my schedule and see what we've got going and get back to you on that.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other issues that anyone wants to bring up, or just general comment? I don't know if anyone else from the SBC staff has anything else they want to add. I think the key focus for us right now is, man, get those partnership agreement letters in. We want to show robust support. Even though we know we don't have a competing application, we really want to try to get as many community partners on board as we can, so that this is a really robust and thoughtful process. So.
Yeah, Steve, David Griffith here. I can try and poke some of the ones in Alpine County. But I know that some of them, for instance, the Chamber of Commerce, between now and Saturday, they're swamped because of the death ride.
Yeah.
And the others are pretty busy too. Will it help at all if their letters don't come in until after the 18th, or is it just a waste of time?
You know, it would help. I don't want to stop receiving the letters. I just am not going to be able to add them to our grant application if we can't get it done by the 22nd. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But partnership agreement letters are really for participation in the process. And we want everyone to participate in the process. So yeah, getting them afterwards would be fine, but I don't, if people can do it before that, they'll be included in the application and they'll demonstrate community support, which is really important.
Steve, I just wanted to add that I really appreciate the concern about the tribal involvement being brought up. It certainly can be the elephant in the room many times. And I know it'll take a long time to build trust, but I also know the intent is to distribute these funds equitably and to disinvested communities. So, if you can find it a way to trust in the process, we are committed. So I just want to say I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments or consideration before we drop off? I see that a couple of new people joined the call after we did introductions, but in particular, I want to thank Barbara Hayes for being here. I think RCRC is going to be a critical partner in this process as well. And thank Terrence for being here as well. Like, their support in these rural counties has been really critical to getting to this point. So, so if there's no additional comments, we could probably call it a day. We will have done our lunch and learn in 1 hour flat.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice job.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.